You are alone right now. Maybe not completely. Maybe there is someone in the next room, or a voice in your headphones, or 1,000 strangers scrolling somewhere on the far side of your screen. But if you are honest, in this exact moment, it is mostly just you. And some quiet part of you has learned to prefer it that way. You told yourself that solitude is peace. You told yourself you recharge alone. But the real answer is far stranger than comfort, because your body does not believe you. Deep inside you, older than language, older than cities, there is an alarm. And when you are left alone for too long, that alarm begins to ring. You cannot always hear it, but it is ringing right now. What does it sound like? It sounds like a low restlessness you cannot name, a pull toward your phone, a sudden urge to text someone, anyone, about nothing at all. You think that is boredom. It is not boredom. It is the oldest survival system in your body, quietly telling you that something is wrong. To understand why, you have to go back. Not 100 years, not 1,000. You have to go back to a world where being alone did not mean peace and quiet. It meant death. For almost the entire history of your species, a human being standing alone on the open ground was a human being about to die. Alone, you could not bring down large animals. Alone, you could not defend a sleeping camp. Alone, one twisted ankle, one fever, one bad night in the cold, and you were gone. Your ancestors did not survive because they were strong. A lone human is a soft, slow, clawless creature. They survived because they were together. Think about how strange that makes you. You have no fangs, you have no armor, you cannot outrun a wolf, you cannot climb like a leopard. By every rule of the wild, your species should have vanished. And yet here you are, sitting at the top of the entire living world. How? The answer is not your body. The answer is the group. A single human is prey. A group of humans is the most dangerous thing on the planet. Everything you are, everything your species became, was built on one simple fact. You needed each other to live. So evolution did something clever. It made being alone hurt. There is a scientist named Robin Dunbar who spent years trying to understand why the human brain grew so enormous, so hungry, so expensive to run. Your brain burns roughly 1/5 of all your energy. Something had to justify that cost. What Dunbar proposed became known as the social brain hypothesis. Your brain did not grow big to make tools or hunt animals. It grew big to keep track of other people, to remember who helped you, who betrayed you, who owed you, who could be trusted. Dunbar even found a number, now called Dunbar's number, for how many stable relationships the human mind seems built to hold. Around 150. Read that again. The largest, most powerful object in the known universe, the human brain, evolved mainly to handle friendship. You are not a thinking machine that happens to be social. You are a social machine that happens to think. So what happens to a machine like that when you take the people away? A researcher named John Cacioppo spent his life answering exactly that. He was a neuroscientist at the University of Chicago, and he became known as the man who mapped loneliness inside the human brain. What he found changed everything. Loneliness, he argued, is not a weakness or a mood. It is a biological signal, built into you the same way hunger and thirst are built into you. Think about what hunger really is. Hunger is not the absence of food. Hunger is a warning. It is your body saying, find food or you will die. Cacioppo said loneliness works the exact same way. It is not the absence of people. It is a warning. It is your body saying, find your people or you will not survive. And here is the strange part. When you feel lonely, your body does not relax. It does the opposite. Cacioppo discovered that lonely people become hypervigilant. Without a tribe watching their back, the brain quietly shifts into a threat state. It scans faces for danger. It reads neutral expressions as hostile. It sleeps lighter, waking more often through the night, as if standing guard over an empty camp. Your ancestors who did this lived. The ones who slept soundly and alone in the open dark did not pass their genes forward. So the fear got written into you. You are the descendant of the nervous ones, the ones who could not stop checking the shadows. Does that sound familiar? The restlessness when the house is too quiet, the way you sleep worse in an empty bed, the way a lonely stretch of life makes the whole world feel a little more hostile, a little more against you. That is not a personality flaw. That is a 400,000-year-old instinct still running inside a modern skull. Cacioppo noticed something else, something almost tragic. Loneliness feeds itself. A lonely brain, primed to see threat, starts to expect rejection everywhere. It pulls back, it guards itself, and that guardedness pushes other people away, which deepens the loneliness, which sharpens the threat detection even further. The alarm meant to pull you toward people can, if it rings too long, quietly trap you further from them. A signal designed to save you turns into a cage. But the alarm goes deeper than fear. It reaches all the way into pain itself. There was an experiment, simple and almost cruel in its cleverness, run by a psychologist named Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA. She put people inside a brain scanner and had them play a small computer game of catch with two other players. Toss the ball, catch the ball, toss it back. Harmless. Then, partway through, the two other players stopped throwing to the person in the scanner. They just played with each other. The real person sat there, ball never coming, quietly left out. It was a game. It meant nothing. The other players were not even real. And yet the scanner lit up. The region of the brain that activated was the same region that activates during physical pain. Your brain, it turns out, does not draw a clean line between a broken bone and a broken bond. Being excluded does not merely feel like sadness. On a neural level, it registers as injury. Eisenberger's work revealed something your ancestors already knew in their bodies. Social rejection is a wound. That is why the words still sting years later. That is why being left out of the group, ignored in the message thread, unseen at the party, can ache in a way that seems out of all proportion. It is not out of proportion. Your brain is treating it as a threat to your survival. Because for most of human history, it was. To be cast out of the group was a death sentence. Your brain still remembers the sentence, even when the group is only a chat you were not added to. But maybe you are thinking that a game and a scanner are not the real world. Maybe you are thinking that people are tougher than that. So consider what happens when the isolation is not a game and does not end. Long before any of this brain science existed, a psychologist named Harry Harlow ran a series of experiments that would horrify most people today. He took infant monkeys and raised some of them in complete isolation, without a mother, without a single warm body to cling to. The monkeys had food, they had water, they had everything a body supposedly needs to live. They fell apart anyway. The isolated monkeys rocked back and forth for hours. They bit themselves. Placed later among normal monkeys, they did not know how to belong. Some never recovered. Harlow had proven something that sounds obvious now, but was radical then. A warm body is not a luxury. Contact is not a bonus stacked on top of survival. For a social animal, connection is survival, as basic as air. And you are a social animal, the most social animal that has ever lived. Now take that truth and turn it on a human being. What happens when you take a person, an adult, sane and healthy, and you leave them completely alone? You do not have to imagine it. It has been done over and over inside the walls of prisons. There is a psychiatrist named Stuart Gracian who studied people held in solitary confinement, sealed in a cell with no meaningful human contact, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. What he documented was chilling. Isolation did not just make people sad, it unmade their minds. They lost the ability to think clearly. They drifted into confusion, panic, and hallucinations. Some heard voices in the silence. Some could no longer tell their own thoughts from the world around them. Gracian's conclusion was blunt. Prolonged isolation is not merely unpleasant, it is a specific injury to the human brain, so consistent in its symptoms that he gave it a name. The mind, left alone too long, begins to come apart. Explorers found the same thing, where no prison existed. People who overwinter in Antarctica, sealed in tiny crews through months of darkness and isolation, describe something the old hands call winter over syndrome. Drifting attention, low mood, a strange fog that settles over the mind when the human world shrinks to a handful of faces and then, in the long dark, to almost none. The pattern is always the same. Cut a human off from other humans and the machine built to handle people starts to malfunction. So the danger is not just in your feelings. Now watch it reach all the way down into your cells. There is a scientist named Steve Cole, also at UCLA, who worked alongside Cacioppo, and asked a question that sounds almost like science fiction. Can loneliness change your genes? Not the genes themselves, but which ones are switched on and which are switched off. What he found was extraordinary. In chronically lonely people, a specific pattern of gene activity shifts. The genes that drive inflammation get turned up. The genes that fight off viruses get turned down. Sit with what that means. Your body, sensing that you are alone and therefore in danger, quietly rewires its own defenses. It braces for the kind of threat a lonely ancestor would have faced: a wound, an attack, a fight for survival. And it dials up inflammation to prepare. It does this for years, silently, whether or not any attack ever comes. And that long, slow burn of inflammation is exactly what drives so many of the diseases that end modern lives. Heart disease, stroke, the slow failures of age. Loneliness does not stay in your head. It writes itself into your blood. So here is the counterintuitive twist, the thing that flips the whole story around. You have been taught to treat loneliness as a problem to be fixed, a sad feeling to escape, maybe even a sign that something is wrong with you. But loneliness is not the disease. Loneliness is the cure trying to work. It is the alarm doing its job perfectly, dragging you back toward other people, back toward the only thing that ever kept your kind alive. The pain is not there to hurt you. The pain is there to save you. The ache you feel in an empty room is the same design as the pain you feel when you touch a hot stove. It is not cruelty, it is protection. It is your body pulling your hand back from something that could kill you. The stove just happens to be an empty life, which means the real danger was never feeling lonely. The real danger is what happens when you stop. Before you get to that, look at the other side of the coin. If cutting people off can rewrite your blood and unmake your mind, what does the opposite do? What happens to a human being who is truly, deeply surrounded? There is a town in Pennsylvania called Roseto. In the middle of the last century, researchers noticed something they could not explain. The people of Roseto barely died of heart disease. They smoked, they ate rich food, they worked hard, dangerous jobs. By every medical measure of the time, their hearts should have been failing. They were not. A researcher named Stuart Wolfe dug into the mystery for years, and the answer he found had nothing to do with diet or exercise. It was the town itself. Roseto was tightly woven. 3 generations lived under one roof. Neighbors knew neighbors. No one faced anything alone. That web of connection, and nothing else anyone could measure, seemed to be guarding their hearts. And then, as the years passed, Roseto changed. The young moved away. The old traditions faded. Families spread out and turned inward. The tight web loosened. And, as it did, the heart attacks arrived, right on schedule, until Roseto looked like everywhere else. The protection had never been in the food or the genes. It had been in each other. When the togetherness left, the shield left with it. That is not a folktale. That is measured in the same numbers that measure any disease. A researcher named Julianne Holt-Lundstad wanted to put a hard figure on it. She gathered the data from hundreds of thousands of people across dozens of studies and asked a brutal question. Does being socially disconnected actually shorten a human life? The answer she found was staggering. Chronic loneliness raises your risk of early death by roughly the same amount as smoking. It rivals obesity. It outranks physical inactivity. Your ancestors were right to fear the empty ground. The empty ground is still lethal. It has just moved indoors. So the science all points one way. Connection is not comfort. Connection is medicine. And its absence is a slow, quiet poison your own body brews for you when you are left alone too long. Which brings you to now, to the strangest experiment of all, the one nobody designed, the one you are living inside at this very moment. For the first time in the entire history of your species, a human being can meet almost every need without another human being. You can eat without a hunting party. Food arrives at your door, handed over by someone whose name you will never learn. You can be entertained without a storyteller by the fire. A screen does it, endlessly, alone. You can work without a room full of colleagues. You can shop, bank, learn, and travel without speaking a word to a soul. You can be soothed, informed, amused, aroused, and put to sleep, all without a single face turned toward yours. Your ancestors could not silence the loneliness alarm. If it rang, they had to answer it or die. You can silence it. You can drown it out all day, every day, with a device that fits in your hand. And that is the trap. The alarm still rings. Cacioppo's work showed it never stopped. The hypervigilance, the light sleep, the ache of being unseen, all of it still fires inside you, exactly as it fired in your ancestors on the open ground. But now, instead of sending you toward people, the signal gets muffled under a glowing screen. The hunger is still there. You've just found a way to ignore the growl. And a growl you ignore does not mean the body no longer needs feeding. Think about how the modern world answers that ache. You feel the pull toward people, and instead of a person, you reach for a substitute. A feed that mimics conversation without anyone speaking to you. A stream of faces you will never meet. 10,000 followers, and no one to call at midnight. Each of these gives your brain a faint taste of connection, just enough to quiet the alarm for a moment, never enough to actually feed you. It is the social equivalent of sugar. Sweet, empty, and leaving you hungrier than before. There's a pair of researchers, Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary, who argue that belonging is not a want, but a need, one of the deepest human drives there is, ranked alongside food and safety. Not a preference, a requirement. Their phrase for it was the need to belong. And a need, unlike a wish, does not go away when you ignore it. It only goes underground, and it takes its cost out of you quietly, in your sleep, in your blood, in the slow narrowing of your world. So sit with that for a moment. The quiet you told yourself was peace. The solitude you called recharging is the same signal your ancestors would have sprinted across a valley to escape. Your body has not forgotten what it is for, only you have. None of this means you are broken for wanting time alone. Rest is real. Silence is real. There is a difference between choosing solitude for an afternoon and slowly disappearing from other people for years without noticing. The alarm is not asking you to fear yourself. It is asking you to remember something simpler. You were never meant to do this alone, so the next time the house goes too quiet, and that restless pull rises up in you, and your hand reaches for the phone to make the feeling stop, pause. Just for a second. Listen to it instead of silencing it. That feeling is not a flaw in you. It is the oldest, wisest part of you. The part that walked out of the ice ages and the famines and the long, dark nights, still whispering the one instruction that kept your entire species alive. Do not answer it with a screen. Answer it with a person. Call the friend you keep meaning to call. Sit with the family you take for granted. Say the first word to the stranger. Every one of those small acts is you, finally, feeding a hunger you have been starving for years. You are alone right now, but you were never built to stay that way. And the ache you feel in the quiet is not emptiness. It is the sound of everyone who ever loved a human being, reaching across 400,000 years, trying to pull you back home.